This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And on this episode, he's going to be checking out the varied weaponry of Rockstar's crime classic, Grand Theft Auto 5.
Okay, pause there, because we have a splendid view of the hilarious hand-drawn sight reticle that I'm going to assume this was made by Trevor. I mean, it's such a spectacularly bad idea. Why not do it with some style?
If there are any other games, guns, and mechanics that you guys want to see Jonathan break down, let us know in the comments section below. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one, and if you'd like to help out the Royal Armouries Museum and continue to support Jonathan's work, check out the links in the description of this video. Right, over to Jonathan.
Well, I knew this going in. This is Grand Theft Auto, of course, but this thing is actually more wacky than it looks. So apart from not really resembling any real firearm, it looks a little bit P7, but based on what this is supposed to be, I'm not sure that's intentional. What's funky about it is that when the slide locks open, it locks open really far back. It's almost as though a Grand Theft Auto game hasn't thought through the mechanics of a firearm. I mean, it's so far back on the gun that it's not going to work properly. So it doesn't quite function as it ought to. It's got the name Shrewsbury, on the side, which is a town in England. I'm assuming that's meant to be the maker. So an interesting backstory potentially that I'm not aware of there. Alright, another alleged product of the Shrewsbury Firearms Company, which has a rather nice red deer stag logo by the look of it. Appropriately British, I suppose. The gun, however, isn't. The gun is very clearly based on a Saiga 12 Kalashnikov pattern 12 gauge, or in this case, 12 gouage. Because among other pedantic aspects of my personality, spelling and grammar are definitely two of them. And point is, they misspelled the word gauge. Now, that might be a deliberate mistake, but it's quite funny that it's there. So in very close detail, this will be a theme. This is not a super close match for the Saiga 12 that it's based on, but the general silhouette is basically the same. And it performs much as you've seen the Saiga 12 in other games perform. It's a gas-operated, semi-automatic shotgun. Pretty devastating, but much more of a competition shotgun, really, than a tactical one. Having said that, I've definitely seen Russian special forces or security forces toting them around. So they are actually used for fighting purposes. Alright, next up we've got an AK, blinged out, if I can bring myself to use that word. And the buttstock tells us right away that this is meant to be a Chinese Type 56-2, which is the side-folding buttstock version of the Chinese copy of the AK. But it's been kind of cartelled up pretty severely with somehow kind of carving in relief on the sheet metal receiver, which I think would be a really bad idea. Okay, so I think a bit of a quirk of the game's design heritage as a third-person kind of lock-on shooter is that there's not a huge amount of recoil evident. This AK is pretty laser accurate, really. There's not the classic climb up and to the right that you'd expect from, well, the real thing actually. Never mind the virtual version. The first-person view, which I never experienced, looks pretty good, but has the classic issue of the sights not being aligned. So you're using just the front sight to aim. The rear sight is not equal height, equal light, as we tend to say. It just kind of sits there, looking pretty.
Find your bitch ass cover. Shit, on your left.
This is a really odd one. Especially because this is one of the standard pistols in the game, so you see it in the hands of agents and all sorts of things, whereas you'd expect to see something like a Glock, of course. And it's some sort of really wacky machine pistol, fully automatic pistol, totally fictional. I mean, you could try and compare it to a few designs that have appeared over the years, but I would probably question all of those. I think this is an entirely original, or as close to entirely original as you can get for a video game, for a 9mm machine pistol. So in the world of GTA, everyone and their mum is running around with a machine pistol, which I suppose fits. That kind of checks out with the level of responsibility with firearms that people in GTA games tend to show. Yeah, this thing is far too controllable. That's quite a weak stance that the player's got there. Bit of a Weaver style stance, not sufficient to support something that would be doing anything from 900 rounds per minute up. Not very controllable. The muzzle will rise very, very quickly. There are people with the skill to control such things. I'm not sure our guys are those guys. Yeah, and then as if the dodgy pistol stance wasn't insufficient enough, blind firing one-handed around a corner with a fully automatic pistol. Well, I mean, it happens in the criminal fraternity, don't get me wrong, but you would be hitting even less than the player here is hitting. Probably mainly the sky and then potentially some poor people / property / pets down the road where the bullets land. Not a good idea for anyone, really.
Where you got LD?
No, let's pause. Can't take it. Oh lord. Okay, so RPG-7, as I'm sure everyone has spotted, with a weird hexagonal breech shield on the back there. That should be a flat, round plate around the breech. Otherwise, it's reasonably correct, but of course this one is neon pink with a white heat shield. So they have modelled here something approximating a PG-7 munition. The back end doesn't look right, it looks like a pipe bomb. What it should be is a cardboard sleeve over some flick-out metal fins, which we don't see deploy when the thing is shot. It shoots like a rocket does. So this is what should be a recoilless weapon with a rocket-assisted munition is depicted as a rocket launcher, which is entirely expected. Interestingly, in first-person view, we see the sights being used here, somewhat realistically, so we're aiming over using one of the higher settings, but with this delightful pink paint job, and I'm not sure if the sight markings are there normally. You have no sight markings to be sure how many meters you're shooting out to, but it seems to allow you to aim it with a bit more precision than in third person.
I ain't laying down for them. Get out of here!
I've seen a couple, as well as Shrewsbury, the apparently British firearms maker. We've got this Vom Feuer company, which I am informed, I mean I was aware of what Feuer meant, fire. Vom is apparently the word from, so From Fire, not an inappropriate name for a German firearms manufacturer. And there are at least 2 German firearms manufacturers who make AR-15 pattern rifles like this one. Although this one appears to be a US-made Vultor upper receiver, I think. Very chunky, blocky looking thing. Others have copied it. And that big chunky round rail that almost looks fake, but I think it's meant to be a Daniel Defense MFR, which stands for Modular Float Rail. Floated meaning that the rail doesn't contact the barrel at any point. In other words, this is actually a fairly legitimate setup. The colours are a bit screwy. Silver bolts are not uncommon. Silver dust covers are a bit, and then the white stock is kind of weird. Yeah, for this game, it's a fairly spot-on interpretation of a modern AR-15.
Man one.
You should have seen the look on his face. There's a guy coming out of the control tower. Take him out. Shit.
And they all came tumbling down.
This is clearly closely based on the M82/M107 Barrett, maybe with some bits of Accuracy International thrown in, I'm not sure. The way it handles isn't spot on. The magazine should rock in, not just slap in, for example. So interestingly, the effect of this thing on target is less than I would expect for such an over-the-top game as GTA. The poor unfortunate struck by the enormous bullet simply drop in place. They don't go flying back as so many in video games do. Another example of GTA walking an interesting line between, dare I say, realism and absolute insanity in some cases. One real-world advantage of big, powerful rifles like the Barrett is that they allow users to engage targets behind cover. Doesn't look like they've modelled that. So the thin steel of a bus should be absolutely no problem for a 50 BMG round. Should basically go straight through, pretty much unaffected, and then hit whatever's on the other side. So if you know someone's there, you should be able to hit them. Right, this is, in real life, the Kel-Tec KSG, which is a dual magazine tube, single barrel, 12 gauge shotgun. Massive fudge on the reload on this thing, possibly the other shotguns in the game, I'm not sure. A single cartridge introduced to one of the magazine tubes is sufficient to reload the complete weapon somehow. So that really does feel like a throwback to what's meant to be a fun, throwaway, third-person shooting experience, where suddenly we're having to model it in first person, and for whatever reason, we're not showing even like a super high speed comedy sped up, shoving in all the rounds. We don't even get that. We just get one round. Needless to say, that wouldn't work.
Step right up! Step right up!
I don't wish to be too critical, but this might be the weakest sounding and recoiling Desert Eagle I've ever seen in a game. Looks pretty close to the Mark 19 50 caliber, but the sound effect isn't particularly punchy, at least not on my speakers, and it doesn't recoil like the real thing does. So I think we've hit a limitation here of a third-person game turned into first-person. Okay, so when we go back to the classic third-person view with Trevor here, we see a much more exaggerated, much more accurate depiction of how this thing flips, at least the 50 caliber version, how this thing muzzle flips quite dramatically. Nothing much you can do about that, even if you are quite strong. So it looks much more meaty and realistic from the third-person view, not great from the first.
我得补充子弹！快导演啊！我们有人倒下了！往后退！小心！
So, not what I remember from the game, but we are looking, of course, at a riff on the G36, Heckler & Koch G36 5.56 rifle. The trigger group has different shaped grip. These things don't have the option, like an AR-15, of different separate grips to swap out. They're stuck with whatever's on that trigger group. Details like the trigger are obviously not right. It's got a version of the classic HK/B&T folding buttstock, but it's different. I get very much a sense of legal difference from this thing. But what's not wrong per se, I don't think, is the magazine setup. So the classic G36 has a rock-in magazine arrangement, but because it is modular, you can replace the magazine well with a Stanag or M16. So this will take AR-15, M16 magazines, as well as its own translucent ones that it comes with, and it has the catch here. So the weird looking magazine arrangement with a straight magazine, although it's not a match for this by any means, is something that has a parallel in reality. But it's a fudge overall to look deliberately different. Hey, we've got a mini Uzi working pretty much as we'd expect, except that it's firing from the closed bolt, which the mini Uzi does not, unless it's a semi-automatic version. Now, I remember this as one of the classic GTA weapons that you can use while driving. It's exactly what we see happening here. I mean, it's a staple of action movies, of course, to drive with one hand and shoot with the other. Not so convenient with the old stick shift that most of us in Europe are, I was going to say stuck with, but I'm a fan. But it does limit your ability to shoot while driving, which otherwise you could do. To what effect? Probably depends on your familiarity with shooting whilst driving. You'd at least put some heads down, I dare say.
Sweet mother shit.
I feel I have to introduce this one as It's a Damn Minigun. Name that film, I'm sure you already have. It looks a little chunky. The barrel cluster looks a little bit enormous, but short. I don't know if the proportions are quite right, but then the whole gun is a sort of pastiche of that Terminator 2/Predator gun. In GTA, like so many video games, it's just handheld. It has no means of being powered. It has no means of being fed with ammunition. It just magically spawns rounds and fires them, and then magically ejects the casings. But then, you know, I can completely see how trying to model all of that for a game where you pull guns out of thin air just isn't worth it. So, I get it. So yeah, as expected, zero recoil on this thing. They haven't even bothered to try and implement it. It's like it's on a pedestal mount, which of course directs all the recoil forces through to multiple bolted arms on the floor of something very solid. This is very much fantasy land.
Hold your nerve. Keep that down. Clear.
Hey guys, I got a gun up here in case you need me to wade in.
There's a strong tradition in the GTA games of fudging weapons generally, but certainly in my memory, the SMGs, which have been based on numerous designs over the years. This one is kind of the love child of an MP5 with that telescoping buttstock, curved magazine, the cocking handle where it is, and probably this thing. It's got the angular receiver, the dimples over the magazine well. Not entirely convinced, but it's a mashup of, it's not a straightforward MP5 at least. So what's this? Well, this is the Chilean FAMAE SAF. Bit of a mouthful. But I think there's probably there's at least a family resemblance here, and it's something different that we've not looked at before. They all function pretty similarly. Not an ideal thing to be engaging armoured opponents with. So these guys are meant to be professional, even if it's just soft body armour, which I guess it might well be. Pistol ammunition, such as fired by both of these, not ideal, and yet these guys go down like 9 pins.
Hey, Char.
Okay, pause there because we have a splendid view from first person of the hilarious hand-drawn sight reticle that I'm going to assume this was made by Trevor, that he has scrawled onto a piece of plastic, glass, set into the back blast shield on what is actually a fairly hilarious cardboard copy of the Panzerschreck, which is behind me. I don't propose to wave about on camera. It's pretty close in basic configuration. Why you would base an improvised rocket launcher on Panzerschreck rather than anything else, I don't know. I mean, it's such a spectacularly bad idea. Why not do it with some style?
That's already at the end of the walkway, top of those stairs.
I ain't going anywhere, Davey, until some more of these guys kill each other.
Right, not a common find on the streets of LA, or, well, I guess it is on the streets of Los Santos. This is the Russian, originally Soviet PKM, or something close to it. The barrel looks a bit short, the gas system definitely looks too short, and I think the stock's wrong, but it's clearly based on that. Now, we've got 2 different feed devices on this thing. There's a classic PK style ammo box. It's not a magazine, it just holds a belt of ammunition. And then similarly, but incorrectly, we've got the equivalent feed device, the round box thing, from the RPD, the smaller 7.62x39 Russian light machine gun. They've clearly put those in for a bit of unlockable, upgradable variety, and as I say this, I'm sure someone somewhere has got a round drum on a PK type light machine gun, general purpose machine gun. But it's not normal, needless to say. But then what about GTA is normal?
Pick it up, Mikey! My gun's getting hot!
We have, as always, links in the description to the Royal Armouries website, various things going on, social media and on site at our 3 museums. If you'd like to donate to us, we'd really appreciate that. And there's a link there to do that as well. There's no pressure at all. We will see you again next time.